update on the Jen Shah sentencing, because it was reported on Page 6 that after the sentencing later that night, she went out in Midtown with a group of 20 people, and they went to dinner. And she the news article said that they celebrated, and some people were like, I'm sure she just wanted to be surrounded by good people, people that love her, and she wasn't actually celebrating. And I was just like, really? I mean, who goes out to dinner? First of all, I'm sure Coach and the boy, or actually we know Coach and the boys were with her in court. But who goes out to dinner at a fancy restaurant in Midtown with 20 people? That's going to be a very expensive tab. That is not a choice that I would make after sentencing. Okay. It just feels a little tone deaf. It just feels a little, not the vibe. It's again, not a choice that I would make. I'm trying to find the name of the restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant. It's called Valbella at the Park in Midtown. I've never been there. So I can't say anything about it, but I just thought it was a very interesting choice to publicly, here's the thing. Go to somebody's home. If you have friends in New York, go to one of their home, order food just to not be out and flashy. I mean, she literally showed up with her Gucci handbag and her cheetah print outfit. And I'm just like, that's how we're going to court. It's just, we're not, it still doesn't click with her, does it? But now she's like, you know what? I've been sentenced. I'm good. I'm going to live it up. I'm going to go party it up. She probably went to the club afterwards. Up in the club, in the club, in the club. So as we know, she was sentenced to 6.5 years in federal prison with 5 years supervised release. She also owes a $6.6 million tab in restitution on top of what's already been seized by the feds, which I believe is about 6.4. So she has an additional 6.6 that she will have to pay back. Pretty sure there's some cash hidden somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised. That's my own speculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some money hidden somewhere, and we're going to start to, use that. Also, they outed that Coach Shah makes $600,000 a year annually. They're good. They'll be able to pay that back. He makes a good salary. I don't even know why she needed to steal from all the grandmas. Just unnecessary, greedy and unnecessary. So a lot of people are comparing Jen Shah to the Chrisleys, and they're upset about how the Chrisleys got more. I think Julie got 7 years, and then Todd got 11, 12 years. So Todd and Julie, they got more time because they went to trial. Okay. So let's also clarify that Jen Shah got 6.5 years, but she has $6.6 million in restitution. Emily D. Baker broke it down a little better in last week's episode, but basically, if you pay more in restitution, you can get a little less time served, right? So some people were serving heavier sentences, but they also had a lot more restitution, or a lot less restitution that they had to pay. So that also goes into effect as to why Jen Shah and the Chrisleys are a little bit different. Also, the Chrisleys went to trial. I believe they have to turn themselves in next week. What was it, the 17th, the 18th? They have sometime next week. They do have to turn themselves in Florida. So I know right now they're on appeal for legal reasons. Uncertain of how that's going to play out. I know they were trying to fight having to serve time. They wanted to be out while they were fighting their appeal. Unclear whether or not that'll be allowed. They may have to start serving their time and then also be in the appeal process. But we'll see. So another thing that I wanted, yes, the Chrisleys and Jen Shah are very different. The Chrisleys had to go to trial. They took a gamble and they lost, right? Even though they don't have victims the way Jen Shah has victims. Jen took a plea deal. She was facing up to 50 years. It wasn't likely that she was going to get the full 50 years that she was facing, but she cut a deal. They dropped the conspiracy to commit money laundering charge, kept the conspiracy to commit wire fraud charge, and she got them to reduce her sentence. She was smarter. It's unfortunate, though, because she was going around saying that she was going to stand up for all these people that can't fight for themselves, and then, she decided she was going to help herself at the end of the day. But that's the difference between the Chrisleys and Jen. Jen took a plea deal to get less time. The Chrisleys decided to go to trial, tried to go up against the feds, and they lost. They took a gamble, and it did not pay off. So now there's some confusion around the 5 years of supervised release. People seem to be confusing that with house arrest. Jen Shah is not on house arrest. It's basically like a federal probation after you get out of jail, after you get out of prison, rather. So supervised release happens after you get out, not in place of your current sentencing, if that makes sense. So parole is served in place of your prison time. So if you get released on parole, it's usually because you're released early and you have, a certain amount of time that you're technically still supposed to be in prison, but you got released early for, usually it's good behavior, but you still have time that you can technically serve. That's why you can't break parole and you have to check in with your parole officer and all of that sort of stuff. So you still have to serve time, but if you have a history of good behavior, you do good acts of contrition, all of that stuff, you're helping all the homeless and toothless in the prison, then you can get out early and you're on parole for the remainder of your sentence. But that can be revoked if you don't abide by the conditions of your parole that's set forth by a parole board, right? So a prisoner can request parole after a certain amount of time, and then a parole board will consider it, and then they set those conditions if they approve it. But it's a board that makes that decision, whereas supervised release is only served after you've completed your prison time and are out of prison. I guess it's similar. It's very similar to parole, except you don't actually get to get out of prison early necessarily. But you do still have like a parole officer that you have to report to, and you have to continue to maintain good behavior. You have to make sure you don't get into any trouble, and otherwise, you can end up back in prison. And that's usually, that amount of time is set by the judge at sentencing. So the judge determines how much supervised release you have to keep up. So how much time after prison you have to still be a good person and make sure you don't continue to con the elderly. Usually people get like 1 to 5 years of supervised release after prison. Jen Shah got that full 5 years, the maximum supervised release that people usually get. Teresa Giudice also had supervised release. She only had 2 years, and she served that once she got out of prison. And it's strict. Like, Teresa got in trouble. She got 2 traffic violations. One of them, I think she was on her phone, and she got pulled over for that. And then a second one was about I think it was like a bad turn that she made, a bad traffic turn. And she got in trouble for not immediately reporting those. I think you have 72 hours to report them. Otherwise, you do get in trouble, and that's a slap on the wrist. And they can be like, lock her back up. But Teresa was sentenced to 15 months in prison. She only ended up serving 11 because of the good behavior that she was exhibiting from prison. She was doing yoga. And you still have to serve majority of your time, but you can get released early, get a little time shaved off if you do, you get released on parole if you do exhibit good behavior. It's not like jail where you can get a lot of time taken off. You usually get like the tail end, like a small fraction of whatever time you have left. Teresa got 15 months. She only served 11 months. Jen Shah has 6.5 years. So I think the lowest she'll likely have to serve is 5 years if she exhibits that good behavior. So that's probably not going to happen, though, because she's not good at being good. She's not good at she's not good at good behavior. She's very good at bad behavior. So I'm pretty sure she's going to end up staying there as long as she can stay there. And she does still have her mandatory supervised release afterwards. But again, it's not house arrest, which some people were confusing it with. They're like, oh, she's going to be stuck at home. No, she just basically has to check in with her officer and make sure she's continuing to be a good person and making sure she doesn't have any infractions. And anytime she has a run-in with law enforcement, she'll have to run it by her parole officer. And hopefully she doesn't do anything else to get her thrown back in the slammer. Those is the updates on Jennifer Shah. She does have to turn herself in by February 17th, so we'll see. She is requesting the Elizabeth Holmes Prison Facility, which is in Bryan, Texas. It's minimum security. It's like a Martha Stewart-styled prison. We'll see.